to Ferguson, Missouri. And the events of the past 11 days have really grabbed our attention, not just through the dramatic pictures and video that we've seen in Ferguson, Missouri, but also through calls for justice on social media. And joining me now, Talib Kweli, a hip-hop artist and activist who's in Ferguson right now, and actor and activist Jesse Williams, who's also a board member of the Advancement Project. And Talib, I have to start with you because we've been hearing about the really dramatic events and what you dealt with police last night. And we had been hearing that things calmed down, but they weren't so calm for you last night. Can you tell us what happened?
No, they were not. If last night was the calmest night, or if that was the police being calm, I would hate to be here when the police are not calm. Me personally, I was told that I was going to have my head blown off. I had guns pointed in my face. I was put on the ground. I was with Jessica Care Moore, Rosa Clemente, friends of mine who are also activists. We were with a bunch of young people. I want to stress to people that there was no looting. There was women and children out there protesting peacefully. And we were out there, and the police acted aggressively. They were antagonizing, they were agitating the crowd, they were being disrespectful with the things they were saying to the people. And then they set up in a formation like they was about to rush the people. They put up their riot stuff, and all of that happened before someone threw a water bottle. Somebody threw a water bottle from somewhere. It was a bottle of water. And after that, the police charged at us like a lion would charge at a gazelle. They ran us down. I'm running in the street. Police is tackling, like literally tackling people in the street. They get that one, get this one. They was trying to arrest whoever they could. You know, by the grace of God, there was a black cop out there who saw us on the ground, and the people I was with, it was like 20 people, and was like, you know what, you need to let these people go. And they let some of us go, and we ran out of there, and I was blessed. But the people who drove us down there, they was arrested. You know what I'm saying?
And you know, Jesse, when you hear a story like that, one of the things that you think about is not so much just what happens when people are engaged in activism, but you've been really eloquent talking about this for the last couple of weeks, is the day-to-day interactions that black men in particular have with police that are fraught with so much tension that it just is escalated by a situation like what's going on in Ferguson.
Well, yeah, the police are really demonstrating what the heart of the matter is. It is a gross overreaction to an exaggerated, sometimes entirely imagined black threat. The big black wild savage needs to be corralled. It becomes a issue over, you know, the traditional civilized versus savage kind of fake nonsense. This reaction is grossly unnecessary, while people play dress up and play war games in the street with civilians. What are the police doing there is my question. You're not protecting the people, and you're not protecting property. So why are you there? And then a larger question I would also ask of American people is it okay to break the law or not? Because the cops are breaking the law left and right. It's state law, state regulation to wear a badge and have a badge number and have a name tag visible. That we have a right to freedom of the press. We have a right to assemble. They've blocked out airspace so that the press cannot view what's going on. They're violating people's rights left and right. They're firing tear gas and other projectiles into people's homes, at people on their private property. So is it okay to use violence to get what you want or not? Because a cop blew the head off of Michael Brown, shot a teenager 6 times, but Michael Brown's the savage because he pushed a guy in a convenience store? Yeah. Like, you don't own us anymore. You see, like, either we all have the same inalienable rights or we don't. Back in the day, we could have separate rights, but we're not. That noise is dead now.
And I mean, Talib, you know, on that specific question that Jesse got to, that question of the badges, because we have seen a lot of people talking about this, and you're down there in Ferguson. Have you seen that the police officers that are dealing with you, that you're seeing on the streets, are they wearing badges?
You know what? I wasn't personally looking to see whether or not cops had badges, but on videotapes of the event that I saw, that I retweeted on my feed, I definitely saw that right where I was at, there were plenty of cops who didn't have badges on. But I mean, I think Jesse, who's been doing a great job all week, you know what I'm saying, raises a good point, is that the reason I'm even down here is because the narrative has been shifted away from what the problem is. The problem is not the legitimate rage. The problem is not a small group of quote-unquote looters. The problem is not even as big as the problem is. The story is not the reaction of the police to the reaction of the people to the action of this cop that murdered this unarmed man. You know, this cop has still not been arrested. Eric Garner's murderer has still not been arrested. John Crawford's murderer has still not been arrested. When Cliven Bundy and his crew decided they wanted to point guns at the police backed down. You know what I'm saying? Out here, I saw with my own 2 eyes, people protesting peacefully, and they are terrorizing and brutalizing this community.
And I mean, Jesse, you have the advantage of having been a school teacher, having taught young people. How do you even explain to kids? I'm struggling even with this with my kids. How do you explain what's going on in Ferguson? Give us some idea of how you would even try to unpack and explain this, particularly to young boys who are Black and Latino.
I think part of it, that it really is the question, Joy. I think part of it is really where we're getting. It's the source of our information, right? Like, it is very easy to get caught down a slippery slope because if we're using the police as our news source, if we give them a little bad theater every night to get up on a pulpit and give us their version of events. The police should have nothing to do with our news source. They're an overtly white racist police force over a Black community that searches 92% of their searches are of Black folks, and more white folks that they pull over have contraband than Black folks. That can't be our news source. And if they block off you guys from having access, that's really what makes it really difficult to explain things from the beginning. So it's really about where we're sourcing our news and, back and tying it into history, learning from history. History is told by the victors, as we know, right? The Native Americans were savages, even though you're slaughtering them. We need to retell stories as they actually happened without injecting opinion and fervor and political gain into it. It's not easy. It's no easy task, certainly.
No, not at all. Well, I really appreciate both of you being there. And Talib, I want to just close out with you because you are there. Tell me, what are the plans tonight? Are there going to be more marches? What do you anticipate seeing on the street there in Ferguson tonight?
Well, again, it's women and children as a community. Last night, I ran into some young brothers. When we was escaping for our lives, basically, from the police, I ran into some young brothers, and I'm like, yo, don't go that way. You need to come this way with us. He's like, man, I live on this street. I have no other place I can go. You know what I'm saying? So it's not looters. It's not some animal class. It's the lack of respect for life that's happening here. This young man was unarmed. He had no criminal record. His life was taken. I've seen people call him a thug. I've seen people try to justify they lack of compassion. That's what's really burning me up about this thing, is that we have we have people in this country who are actually looking for excuses to not care about the fact that this young man's rights was taken. He had no due process. You know what I'm saying? And basically, we as young Black people, men, women, and children, are told that our lives mean nothing, and it fits very nicely into the narrative of this country since slavery and beyond. Well,
I certainly will be watching what's going on for you there, Talib, in Ferguson, as well as Jesse Williams, who's become a real strong voice on this. And thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to everybody.
Thank you both.
And of course, we should make the note that there are a lot of officers out there trying to do the right thing. So we, obviously have to make that point as well. We'll be right back.